Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey. My name is Robert Hayes, and at 64 years old, I never thought my own daughter would break my heart in the cruelest way possible. But she did, and what I discovered afterward will haunt me forever. It was a cold Tuesday evening in Atlanta when I saw something that still makes my chest tighten with pain. I'd driven 3 hours from our small town of Millbrook just to catch a glimpse of my daughter Keisha at her company's promotion celebration. 25 years old, beautiful, brilliant, and completely ashamed of me. I parked my old pickup truck across the street from the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, watching through those tall glass windows as executives in expensive suits mingled with champagne glasses. And there she was, my little girl, the one I'd raised alone since she was 3 years old, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than I make in 2 months at the steel mill. But what happened next shattered every piece of my father's heart. A white woman with perfectly styled blonde hair approached Keisha's table. I watched my daughter's face light up with a smile I hadn't seen in years. She stood up, embraced this stranger warmly, and I heard her voice carry through the hotel's entrance. "Mom, I'd like you to meet my new colleagues from the New York office." Mom. She called another woman Mom. I sat there gripping my steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, watching as Keisha posed for pictures with this fake family she'd created. The same daughter I'd worked 16-hour shifts to put through private school. The same girl I'd sold my father's watch to buy her first laptop for college. The same child I'd held every night when she cried for her real mother after Sarah died of cancer. My wife, Sarah, had been gone for 22 years, but I'd tried to be both parents to Keisha. I taught her to drive in that same pickup truck I was sitting in. I attended every school play, every graduation, every achievement ceremony, until she stopped inviting me 2 years ago. "You're embarrassing, Dad," she told me the last time we spoke. Our background, it's holding me back in the corporate world. These people don't understand our kind of life. Our kind of life." She meant being black. She meant being poor. She meant having a father who worked with his hands instead of pushing papers in a corner office. As I watched her laugh with her fake white mother, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my lawyer's name, William Montgomery, the same man who'd handled Sarah's affairs 22 years ago. "Robert," his voice was shaky, "I've been trying to reach you. After what happened today, I think it's time. Time to tell Keisha about the Blackwood inheritance." My blood ran cold. "Will, we agreed. That was before she started using the name. Robert, she's been calling herself Keisha Blackwood professionally for over a year now. She has no idea what that name means, what it represents, or what she's about to lose forever." I looked back at the hotel window. Keisha was still laughing, still pretending, still living a lie that was about to cost her everything. You see, Blackwood wasn't just a name she'd chosen to sound more professional. It was her birthright, a birthright worth more money than she could ever imagine. But there was a catch. There's always a catch when it comes to family secrets buried this deep. "How long does she have?" I whispered into the phone. 30 days, Robert. 30 days until her 26th birthday. After that, the clause expires forever, and everything our family died for will be lost. I hung up the phone and took one last look at my daughter through that hotel window. She had no idea that in 30 days she'd have to choose between the lie she was living and a truth that would change everything. The worst part, I wasn't even sure which choice would hurt her more. I drove home that night with my heart pounding and my mind racing. 3 hours on dark country roads gave me plenty of time to think about how we'd gotten to this point. How my sweet little girl had become someone who was ashamed of her own father. It started 5 years ago when Keisha graduated from Harvard Business School. I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for that education. My regular shift at the steel mill, weekend construction work, and cleaning offices at night. I sold everything I owned that had any value, including my father's tools and my wedding ring. Sarah's medical bills had already taken the house, so I'd been renting a small apartment above Murphy's hardware store for years. But I didn't care about any of that. My daughter was going to have opportunities I never dreamed of. She was going to break the cycle of poverty that had trapped our family for generations. The first sign of trouble came during her graduation ceremony. I'd saved up for months to buy a decent suit. Nothing fancy, just something that wouldn't embarrass her. When I arrived at Harvard, I found Keisha in the parking lot arguing with her roommate, a white girl named Amanda Sterling from some old money family in Connecticut. "Just tell him the ceremony was cancelled," Amanda was saying. "My parents are taking photos with me, and it'll look better if it's just family." I pretended not to hear, but I saw the shame in Keisha's eyes when she looked at me. Still, she walked with me to the ceremony. Still, she let me take pictures. Still, she hugged me when they called her name. But something changed that day. Something I didn't understand until much later. After graduation, Keisha moved to Atlanta and got hired at Sterling and Associates, Amanda's family company, though she claimed it was just a coincidence. She started calling herself Keisha Blackwood instead of Keisha Hayes. When I asked her about it, she said Hayes sounded too common for her professional environment. "It's just for business, Dad," she'd said. "Blackwood sounds more distinguished." I didn't think much of it at the time. Young people change their names all the time for career reasons. What I didn't know was that Blackwood had been my wife's maiden name, a name Sarah had begged me to never mention, a name that carried secrets I'd promised to take to my grave. The visits became less frequent. First, she'd come home every few weeks, then every few months, then only on major holidays, and even then she'd stay at a hotel instead of my apartment. "It's more convenient, Dad," she'd say. "I have work calls to make." But I knew the truth. She was ashamed of where she came from. Ashamed of the small apartment with its thin walls and second-hand furniture. Ashamed of neighbors who worked factory jobs and struggled to pay rent. Ashamed of me. The final blow came 18 months ago. Keisha had been promoted to marketing manager and invited me to the company Christmas party. I was so proud, so excited to see her workplace and meet her colleagues. I borrowed a car from my neighbor because my pickup truck was in the shop. I even bought a new shirt, the first new clothes I'd purchased in 3 years. When I arrived at the fancy downtown hotel where the party was being held, I looked for Keisha in the crowd of well-dressed professionals. I found her at the bar, laughing with a group of executives. She looked beautiful in a black cocktail dress, her hair styled perfectly, diamond earrings sparkling under the chandelier lights. I was so proud of her success, so grateful that all my sacrifices had paid off. "Keisha!" I called out, walking toward her with the biggest smile on my face. She turned around, and for just a moment I saw panic flash across her eyes. Then she composed herself, walked over to me and said words that still echo in my nightmares. "I'm sorry, sir, but I think you have me confused with someone else." She looked right into my eyes, the same eyes she'd inherited from me, and pretended not to know who I was. Her own father, the man who'd raised her since she was 3 years old, the man who'd given up everything so she could have this life. I stood there in shock as she turned back to her colleagues and continued her conversation as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't exist, as if 22 years of love and sacrifice meant nothing. I left that party and drove home in silence. We hadn't spoken since. But now, sitting in my apartment with William Montgomery's words ringing in my ears, I realized that everything was about to change. The name she'd chosen, Blackwood, wasn't just a professional alias. It was her mother's family name, a name connected to secrets that could either save her or destroy her. And I was the only person alive who knew the truth. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "Mr. Hayes, we need to talk about your daughter and the Blackwood inheritance. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Montgomery's office. Come alone. MB. MB. Those initials made my blood run cold. There was only one person they could belong to, someone I'd hoped would never find us. I looked at my phone's calendar. 29 days until Keisha's 26th birthday. 29 days to decide whether to destroy my daughter's carefully constructed world or let her lose a fortune that rightfully belonged to her. Either way, I was about to lose her forever. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face from 23 years ago, weak and pale in that hospital bed, gripping my hand with what little strength she had left. "Promise me, Robert," she'd whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the machines keeping her alive. "Promise me you'll never tell Keisha about my family, never let her know about the Blackwood name. It's cursed, Robert. Everyone who's tried to claim what's rightfully ours has died." I promised her that night, holding our 3-year-old daughter in my lap as Sarah took her final breath. I'd kept that promise for 22 years, even when it meant watching Keisha struggle financially through college, even when it meant working myself into an early grave to provide for her. But now she was using that name, Blackwood, and everything Sarah had feared was coming to pass. The next morning, I drove to William Montgomery's law office with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Will had been Sarah's family lawyer long before I met her, and he was one of only 3 people who knew the truth about the Blackwood inheritance. The other 2 were supposed to be dead. The office was in the old part of town, in a building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1950s. Will's secretary, Mrs. Patterson, had been there for 40 years, and still used a typewriter. She looked up at me with sad eyes when I walked in. "He's waiting for you, Robert. Room 3. And Robert," she paused, her voice dropping to a whisper, "be careful. The other gentleman arrived an hour ago, and he's intense." My heart was pounding as I opened the door to conference room 3. Will Montgomery sat at the head of a long wooden table, looking every one of his 78 years. His hands were trembling slightly as he shuffled through a thick stack of legal documents. But it was the man sitting across from him that made my blood freeze. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with graying hair and piercing dark eyes that looked exactly like Sarah's. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and when he stood to shake my hand, I could see the family resemblance immediately. "Hello, Robert," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I'm Marcus Blackwood, Sarah's cousin. I believe we have a lot to discuss about my dear cousin's daughter. I'd heard about Marcus from Sarah, but she'd told me he died in a car accident when Keisha was 5 years old. Apparently Sarah had been wrong, or lying. Sarah said you were dead," I managed to say, still staring at this ghost from my wife's past. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Sarah said a lot of things that weren't entirely accurate. She told you our family was cursed, didn't she? That everyone who tried to claim the Blackwood fortune died mysteriously. Didn't they?" I sat down across from him, my legs suddenly weak. "Some did," Marcus admitted, "but not because of a curse, because of the Sterling family. They've been systematically eliminating Blackwood heirs for almost a century to keep our ancestors' fortune in their hands." Will cleared his throat and opened the first folder. "Robert, I think it's time you knew the whole truth about Sarah's family, about what Keisha is entitled to, and what she's walking into by using that name." He pulled out a faded photograph and slid it across the table. It showed a distinguished black man in a 3-piece suit standing in front of a massive mansion. The man looked successful, proud, and wealthy beyond imagination. "This is Ezekiel Blackwood, Sarah's great-grandfather and Keisha's great-great-grandfather. This photograph was taken in 1920 when he was one of the wealthiest men in America. Black or white?" Marcus leaned forward. "Ezekiel owned 3 banks, 2 railroad companies, and more real estate than most cities. His net worth in today's money would be approximately $400 million. I stared at the photograph. The man looked like an older version of Marcus, who looked like Sarah, who looked like Keisha. The family resemblance was undeniable. "What happened to him?" I asked, though I had a feeling I already knew the answer. "The Sterling family happened," Marcus said, his voice turning cold. "James Sterling Sr. owed Ezekiel nearly $2 million, money he'd borrowed to save his failing businesses. Instead of paying it back, he had Ezekiel murdered and forged documents claiming that Ezekiel had left everything to him in his will." Will pulled out more documents. The forgery was obvious, but this was 1922 in Georgia. No court was going to rule in favor of a black family over a prominent white family, no matter how much evidence we had. For 100 years, the Sterling family has been living off stolen wealth, Marcus continued. They've used that money to build an empire. Sterling and Associates, Sterling Industries, Sterling Real Estate, everything they own should belong to us. My heart sank as the pieces fell into place. Sterling and Associates, that's where Keisha works. More than that, Marcus said with a bitter laugh. She's being groomed for a senior position by Amanda Sterling, James Sterling Sr.'s great-great-granddaughter. The same family that murdered our ancestor is now manipulating his descendant. I felt sick. Does Amanda know who Keisha really is? Oh, she knows, Will said sadly. The Sterling family has been monitoring Blackwood descendants for decades. They've been waiting for someone to use the name professionally, which would trigger the inheritance clause. What inheritance clause? I asked, though I was dreading the answer. Marcus pulled out a leather-bound document that looked ancient. Before he died, Ezekiel created a secret trust. He knew the Sterling family was planning to kill him, so he hid this with a lawyer in Chicago. The trust states that any direct descendant who publicly claims the Blackwood name and can prove their lineage has the right to reclaim the entire fortune. But there's a catch, Will added. They have to do it before their 26th birthday. After that, the opportunity expires forever. I looked at my watch. Keisha turns 26 in 28 days. 28 days, Marcus repeated. 28 days for her to learn the truth about her heritage, prove her identity, and go up against one of the most powerful families in the country. 28 days for her to choose between the comfortable lie she's living and a truth that could get her killed. I thought about my daughter, laughing with her fake white mother at that hotel, completely oblivious to the danger she was in. Why didn't you contact her directly? Why come to me? Marcus's expression softened slightly. Because she has to make this choice willingly. If she's forced into it, if she claims the inheritance for the wrong reasons, she'll end up just like the others who tried before her. Dead, you mean? Dead, he confirmed. The Sterling family doesn't leave loose ends, Robert. They've killed 4 other potential heirs over the past century. Car accidents, house fires, sudden illnesses, all very convenient and very permanent. I stared at the photograph of Ezekiel Blackwood, this ancestor I'd never known existed. He looked proud and dignified, nothing like the cursed figure Sarah had painted him to be. But he also looked doomed, a black man with too much power in an era when that was a death sentence. What do you want from me? I asked. Marcus leaned back in his chair. I want you to tell your daughter the truth, all of it. Let her decide if she wants to fight for what's rightfully hers or continue living the lie that's keeping her safe. I thought about Keisha pretending not to know me at that Christmas party. I thought about her calling another woman Mom just yesterday. I thought about all the years of sacrifice and love that she'd thrown away because she was ashamed of who she was. Maybe it was time she learned exactly who she really was. And if she chooses to fight. Marcus smiled, and for the first time it looked genuine. Then we take down the Sterling family together and reclaim what they stole from us a century ago. And if she chooses the lie? His smile faded. Then she loses everything. The inheritance, the truth, and probably her life. Because Robert, whether she claims the fortune or not, the Sterling family now knows she exists. And they're not going to let another Blackwood heir live to see 26. I left that meeting feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew about my wife's family, everything Sarah had made me promise to keep secret, had been built on half-truths and fear. The drive back to my apartment gave me time to think about what Marcus had told me. $400 million. That number kept echoing in my head as I remembered all the times I'd worked myself to exhaustion just to keep Keisha in school, all the nights I'd gone to bed hungry so she could have a decent meal, all the dreams I'd given up so she could chase hers. But it wasn't really about the money. It was about the lie my daughter was living and the fact that she was walking straight into a trap that had been set a century ago. When I got home, I went to the closet in my bedroom and pulled down a dusty shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were the few personal items Sarah had left behind. A wedding ring I couldn't afford to bury her with, some old photographs, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it in her handwriting. She'd given me that envelope 3 days before she died, making me promise not to open it unless something happened to threaten Keisha's future. At the time, I thought she was talking about her illness, about the possibility of me not being able to care for our daughter alone. I never imagined she meant something like this. My hands were shaking as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter in Sarah's careful handwriting, along with several documents I'd never seen before. "My dearest Robert," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means the past has finally caught up with us, and our daughter is in danger. I'm sorry for all the lies I told you about my family. I was so scared, so terrified of losing you and Keisha the way I lost everyone else I ever loved." I had to stop reading for a moment. Even 22 years later, seeing Sarah's words on paper brought back the grief I'd tried so hard to bury. The truth is that my family wasn't cursed. We were hunted. The Sterling family has been systematically murdering Blackwood heirs for generations, making it look like accidents or natural causes. My parents didn't die in a car crash like I told you. They were killed because they tried to reclaim our inheritance. My blood ran cold. Sarah had told me her parents died when she was 16 in a head-on collision during a storm. She'd cried in my arms so many nights, talking about how much she missed them. I was supposed to die too, but I ran. I changed my name from Sarah Blackwood to Sarah Williams, moved across the country, and tried to disappear. When I met you, I thought I'd finally found safety. I thought if I never used the Blackwood name, if I never told anyone who I really was, they'd leave us alone. I looked at the documents that had been folded with the letter. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, property deeds, all bearing the Blackwood name, all proving that Keisha was the legitimate heir to Ezekiel Blackwood's fortune. But Robert, if something has happened, if Keisha is using our family name, or if the Sterling family has found us, then you need to know the whole truth. Keisha isn't just entitled to money, she's entitled to justice. Our great-grandfather Ezekiel was a good man who built his wealth honestly, through hard work and smart investments. He employed hundreds of people, black and white alike. He funded schools and hospitals in the community. Everything he built was stolen by murderers and thieves. I thought about my daughter working at Sterling and Associates, probably in a building that was paid for with her own family's blood money. The irony was so cruel, it made my stomach turn. "There's something else you need to know," the letter continued. Ezekiel had a son named Marcus, who survived the massacre in 1922. Marcus was 20 years old when his father was killed, and he spent his entire life trying to reclaim our inheritance. I don't know if he's still alive, but if he is, he may contact you. Be careful, Robert. Marcus was consumed by anger and revenge. He's not the enemy, but he's dangerous in his own way. So Marcus had been telling the truth about surviving, but Sarah's warning about him being dangerous stuck in my mind. What wasn't he telling me about his real plans? If you decide to tell Keisha the truth, please be gentle with her. This knowledge destroyed my parents, and it's haunted me every day of my life. But she has a right to know who she is, and she has a right to choose her own path. Just remember that once you open this door, there's no going back. The Sterling family doesn't forgive, and they don't forget. The letter was signed with Sarah's name and dated just 3 days before she died. At the bottom, in different ink, she'd added a postscript. P.S. The key to safety deposit box 247 at First National Bank is taped under the drawer of my jewelry box. Everything Keisha needs to prove her identity is in there. I'd sold Sarah's jewelry box years ago when money was tight, never knowing there was a key hidden underneath. But I remembered who I'd sold it to, Mrs. Chen, who lived 2 blocks away. She'd bought it for her granddaughter. I called Mrs. Chen immediately. "Robert Hayes," I said when she answered. "I sold you my wife's jewelry box about 15 years ago. This is going to sound strange, but I need to look at the bottom of one of the drawers." Mrs. Chen was curious but understanding. She'd known Sarah, had brought casseroles after the funeral. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in her living room with a small key in my hand. The drive to First National Bank felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. The safety deposit box was still registered in Sarah's name, but the bank manager remembered me from when I'd handled her estate. With the key and my ID, they let me access the box. Inside were documents that took my breath away, original stock certificates from Ezekiel Blackwood's companies, photographs of the family mansion before it was seized, bank records showing deposits that would be worth millions today, and most importantly, a family tree that traced our lineage all the way back to Ezekiel himself. But there was something else in the box that made my hands shake, a letter addressed to my great-great-granddaughter, Keisha Blackwood Hayes. Ezekiel had known, somehow, a century ago, he'd known that his descendant would be named Keisha, and he'd left her a personal message. I didn't open that letter. It wasn't meant for me, but holding it in my hands, knowing that my little girl had a personal message from her ancestor waiting for her, made the weight of this decision even heavier. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Have you made your decision, Mr. Hayes? Time is running out. Your daughter was seen having dinner with James Sterling III last night. The engagement announcement will be in the society pages tomorrow morning. MB." I stared at the message in horror. James Sterling III, another descendant of the family that had murdered Ezekiel Blackwood, and Keisha was having dinner with him. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a trap that had been a century in the making. I looked at Ezekiel's letter to Keisha, still sealed after all these years. Whatever he'd written to his great-great-granddaughter, she was going to need his strength and wisdom now more than ever. Because, ready or not, the war between the Blackwoods and the Sterlings was about to begin again. And my daughter was standing right in the middle of the battlefield. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept thinking about Keisha having dinner with James Sterling III, completely unaware that she was dining with the descendant of her ancestor's murderer. By morning, I'd made my decision. I had to warn her, even if it meant destroying the relationship we had left. I called her office at Sterling & Associates at exactly 9 a.m. Her assistant, a polite young woman named Jennifer, told me that Ms. Blackwood was in meetings all morning, but could possibly fit me in around lunchtime. Ms. Blackwood. Even her assistant didn't know her real last name was Hayes. "Tell her it's Robert Hayes," I said. "Tell her it's about her mother's family. Tell her it's urgent." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, sir, but Ms. Blackwood has no meeting scheduled with anyone by that name. Are you sure you have the right person?" My heart sank. Even after everything, she was still pretending not to know me. Just tell her that her father called about the Blackwood inheritance. She'll understand." Jennifer put me on hold for what felt like an eternity. When she came back, her voice was different, colder, more professional. "Ms. Blackwood says she's not available to speak with you, and she asked me to inform you that if you continue to call, she'll involve security." I hung up the phone feeling more alone than I had since Sarah died. My own daughter was threatening to call security on me, but I couldn't give up, not when her life was in danger. I decided to drive to Atlanta and wait for her outside the Sterling building. If she wouldn't take my calls, maybe she'd have to listen to me in person. The Sterling & Associates headquarters was a gleaming 40-story tower in downtown Atlanta, the kind of building that screamed wealth and power. I parked across the street and waited, watching the stream of well-dressed professionals coming and going. At 12:30, I saw her. Keisha walked out of the building wearing a navy blue business suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked successful, confident, and completely at home in this world of corporate power. She also looked nothing like the little girl I used to read bedtime stories to. She was with a tall, handsome white man in an expensive suit. Even from across the street, I could see the way he looked at her, possessive, calculating. This had to be James Sterling III. I crossed the street and approached them as they waited for their car to be brought around by the valet. "Keisha," I called out, "we need to talk." She turned around, and for just a moment, I saw a flash of panic in her eyes. Then she composed herself and looked at me like I was a stranger who was bothering her. "I'm sorry," she said loudly enough for everyone around to hear. "I think you have me confused with someone else. My name is Keisha Blackwood, and I don't know who you are." James Sterling stepped protectively in front of her. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30 years old, with the kind of confident smile that came from never having to worry about money. "Is this man bothering you, darling?" Darling. They were more than just having dinner together. "Keisha," I said, ignoring James and speaking directly to my daughter, "your mother left you something. Something about your real family, about who you really are. You're in danger, and you need to know the truth." "Security!" James called out, and I saw two men in suits start walking toward us from the building entrance. But something in Keisha's expression had changed. She was staring at me with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "What do you mean, my real family?" "Your mother's maiden name was Blackwood," I said quickly, knowing I only had seconds before security reached us. "You're using your mother's family name, but you don't know what it means. You don't know what you're entitled to, or what these people took from your ancestors." James grabbed Keisha's arm. "Don't listen to him, sweetheart. He's obviously delusional. Some vagrant who read about you in the business section and thinks he can scam money out of you." "I'm not a vagrant," I said, my voice rising. "I'm her father. I raised her after her mother died. I worked 3 jobs to put her through Harvard. I sold everything I owned so she could have the life she wanted." The security guards had reached us now, but Keisha held up her hand to stop them. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Prove it," she said quietly. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the one photograph I always carried. A picture of 3-year-old Keisha on my shoulders at a county fair, both of us laughing at something off camera. She was wearing a little yellow dress with sunflowers on it, and I was wearing my old army uniform. Keisha took the photograph with trembling hands. I could see the exact moment she remembered that day, remembered that dress, remembered being happy with the man she was now pretending not to know. "That proves nothing," James said, but his voice was sharp now, worried. "Anyone could have gotten a copy of an old photograph. Tell them about the scar on your knee," I said to Keisha. "Tell them how you got it when you were 7 years old, riding your bike down Miller's Hill too fast. Tell them how I carried you 2 miles to the emergency room because our car wouldn't start." Keisha's hand moved unconsciously to her knee. Even through her business suit, I could see her touching the spot where that old scar was hidden. "Tell them about the time you had nightmares for 3 months after watching a horror movie you were too young for, and how I had to sleep on the floor next to your bed every night until you felt safe again." Tears were starting to form in Keisha's eyes, but she blinked them back. That could be coincidence. Lucky guesses. I pulled out Sarah's letter, the one she'd written to me before she died. "Your mother left this for you. She was Sarah Blackwood before she married me and became Sarah Hayes. She made me promise never to tell you about her family because she was scared they'd find us. But they found us anyway, didn't they? That's how you got the job here. That's how you met him." I pointed at James. James's face had gone pale. "Keisha, we should go. This man is clearly unstable and—" "What do you mean, they found us anyway?" Keisha interrupted, ignoring James completely now. I looked directly at James Sterling III. "Ask your boyfriend about his great-great-grandfather, James Sterling Sr. Ask him what happened to Ezekiel Blackwood in 1922. Ask him why his family has been living off stolen money for 100 years. The color drained completely from James's face. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" I pulled out one of the documents I'd taken from the safety deposit box, the original deed to Ezekiel Blackwood's mansion, the same mansion that now served as the Sterling family estate. "This is the deed to your family's house, James. The deed with Ezekiel Blackwood's signature on it. The same Ezekiel Blackwood who was murdered by your ancestor so he wouldn't have to pay back the money he owed." Keisha looked back and forth between James and me, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was smart. She'd always been smart. She was starting to put the pieces together. "James," she said slowly, "what is he talking about?" James grabbed her arm again, harder this time. "He's talking nonsense, Keisha. Some conspiracy theory cooked up by a desperate man who wants money. We're leaving now." But Keisha pulled her arm away from him. "No," she said firmly. "I want to hear what he has to say." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. For the first time in 2 years, she was still the little girl who used to ask me a million questions about everything, who never accepted simple answers when she could dig deeper for the truth. The Sterling family murdered your great-great-grandfather and stole his fortune, I said. $400 million in today's money, money that belongs to you. But more than that, they've been hunting down Blackwood descendants for a century, making sure no one could ever reclaim what was stolen. That's impossible, Keisha said, but her voice was shaking. Is it? I asked. Think about how you got this job, Keisha. Think about how quickly you were promoted. Think about how Amanda Sterling became your best friend, how James here just happened to ask you out. Do you really think all of that was coincidence? I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. She was starting to remember things, starting to question things that had seemed too good to be true. You have 27 days, I continued. 27 days until your 26th birthday. After that, you lose the right to reclaim your inheritance forever. But if you choose to fight for it, if you choose to expose the truth about what the Sterling family did, you'll be putting your life in danger, because they've killed every other Blackwood heir who tried to get justice. Keisha stared at me for a long moment, then looked at James, who was checking his phone with a worried expression. I need to think, she said finally. I need time to process this. There is no time, I said desperately. They know who you are now. They know you're using the Blackwood name. Whether you claim the inheritance or not, you're a threat to them. James finished his phone call and walked back over to us. The car is here, he said to Keisha. We really should go. But Keisha was still looking at me, still holding that old photograph of us at the fair. If what you're saying is true, she said quietly, if I really am your daughter, then why didn't you ever tell me any of this before? It was the question I'd been dreading, but also the one that mattered most. Because I promised your mother I wouldn't. Because she was terrified that if you knew the truth, they'd kill you like they killed her parents. Because I loved you more than any amount of money, and I wanted to keep you safe. Tears were flowing freely down her cheeks now. And if I choose to believe you, if I choose to fight for this inheritance, what happens then? I looked at James Sterling, who was listening to every word with barely concealed rage. Then we take down the family that's been built on our ancestors' blood, and we probably die trying. Keisha nodded slowly, wiped her tears, and straightened her shoulders. For just a moment, she looked exactly like her mother. Give me the letter, she said. The one from my mother. I want to read it. Keisha took Sarah's letter with hands that were visibly shaking. James stepped closer to her, but she moved away from him, creating distance between them for the first time since I'd arrived. Not here, she said, looking around at the crowd of Sterling employees who had gathered to watch the drama unfold. Too many people. My apartment is 20 minutes away, I offered, but she shook her head. No, somewhere neutral, somewhere public, but private. She thought for a moment. Piedmont Park, the Rose Garden, 1 hour. James grabbed her elbow. Keisha, you can't seriously be considering— Don't touch me, she said sharply, pulling away from him. It was the first time I'd seen her assert herself against him, and from the shock on his face, it was clearly the first time for him too. We'll discuss this later, James. Right now, I need answers. From a delusional homeless man who's trying to scam you? Keisha's eyes flashed with anger. He knew about my scar. He knew about the nightmares. He has a photograph of me as a child. Either he's telling the truth, or this is the most elaborate con in history. James's jaw tightened. Fine, but I'm coming with you. No, Keisha said firmly. This is something I need to do alone. I could see James struggling to maintain his composure. Whatever his plan had been, it wasn't going according to script. Keisha, I love you. I'm trying to protect you from what, James? From the truth about my own family? He didn't have an answer for that. At least, not one he could say in front of me. Keisha turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at me. 1 hour, Rose Garden, and bring everything. Whatever my mother left, whatever documents you have. I want to see it all. I watched her walk away, her heels clicking on the concrete, her back straight and determined. She looked like Sarah walking away from our first fight, hurt, angry, but not broken. James followed her for a few steps, then stopped and turned back to me. When he was sure Keisha was out of earshot, his whole demeanor changed. The charming, protective boyfriend facade dropped, and I saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. "You have no idea what you've just done," he said quietly. "I told my daughter the truth about her family. You signed her death warrant." "Dee," he moved closer, lowering his voice even more. "Did you think we didn't know who she was? Did you think it was an accident that she got hired here, that Amanda befriended her, that I pursued her? We've been watching your family for decades, waiting for someone to use the Blackwood name professionally." My blood ran cold. "So you admit it? You admit your family murdered Ezekiel Blackwood?" James smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "My great-great-grandfather was a businessman who made tough decisions during tough times. Ezekiel Blackwood was getting too big for his britches, forgetting his place in society. What happened to him was regrettable, but necessary. He was murdered for being successful while black. He was eliminated because he was a threat to the natural order of things." James straightened his tie, his composure completely restored. "Just like his descendants have been eliminated when they became threats. You're admitting to multiple murders." "I'm admitting to nothing. I'm simply explaining how the world works. The Sterling family has maintained its position for over a century by being smart, by being careful, and by being thorough. We don't leave loose ends. Keisha isn't a loose end. She's your girlfriend. You're supposed to love her." James laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "Love her? She's a useful tool, nothing more, beautiful, intelligent, with just enough ambition to be manageable. The plan was to marry her, get her to sign a few documents transferring any potential claims to the Sterling estate, and then, well, wealthy wives sometimes have tragic accidents. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat and squeeze until that smug smile disappeared forever. But I knew that would only put Keisha in more danger. "She'll never believe you love her now," I said. "Not after this conversation. She doesn't need to believe it much longer. The engagement party is tomorrow night. Once she says yes publicly, once the announcement hits the society pages, she'll be in too deep to back out. And if she tries..." He shrugged. "Well, like I said, accidents happen." My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it without thinking. A mistake that would haunt me. The message was from Marcus. "Meeting with Kay at Rose Garden in 1 hour. Come prepared. Brought the full documentation. Time to end this." James saw me reading the message, and his smile widened. "Ah, Marcus Blackwood. We wondered when he'd show up. That's perfect, actually. Much easier to eliminate 2 Blackwood problems at once. You can't just murder people in broad daylight in a public park, can't we? A tragic mugging gone wrong. An elderly black man and his confused daughter in the wrong place at the wrong time. These things happen in Atlanta, unfortunately. Very sad, but not particularly suspicious." I realized with growing horror that James wasn't just threatening us. He was laying out an actual plan. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was something that had been prepared for. "How many?" I asked. "How many Blackwood descendants have you killed?" "Not me, personally." "But the family?" "Oh, we've been quite thorough over the years. Car accidents, house fires, sudden illnesses, random violence. Sometimes we didn't even have to arrange anything. Just waited for natural causes to do the work for us." Sarah's parents. The car crash. Brake lines are such unreliable things, especially in old cars. Sarah herself. The cancer. James tilted his head, considering. That one was actually natural, believe it or not. Though we did make sure her medical treatments were less effective than they could have been. Amazing how paperwork can get lost, how insurance claims can be delayed, how experimental treatments can suddenly become unavailable. I felt sick. Sarah had suffered for months, fighting a disease that might have been treatable if she'd gotten proper care, and it was all because of this family's greed. "Why tell me any of this?" I asked. "Why not just lie like you've been lying to Keisha?" Because you're going to die in about 2 hours, and I want you to understand why. I want you to know that everything you've sacrificed, everything you've worked for, all the love you've given your daughter, none of it matters. She's going to die because of who she is, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. James checked his expensive watch. I need to make some calls, arrange for some associates to be in the area of Piedmont Park this afternoon. Terrible neighborhood, really. Crime has gotten so bad there lately. He started to walk away, then turned back one more time. Oh, and Robert, when they find your bodies, Keisha will be wearing her engagement ring. I'm going to propose to her right before you both die. So the last thing she experiences will be the knowledge that the man she trusted completely betrayed her. I thought you'd appreciate the poetry of that. As I watched James Sterling III walk back into the building that was built with my family's stolen money, I realized that Keisha and I were walking into a trap that had been a century in the making. Marcus's text suggested he knew about the meeting, but I had no way to warn him that the Sterling family was expecting us. I looked at my watch. 53 minutes until the meeting. 53 minutes to figure out how to save my daughter's life without getting us all killed in the process. I started walking toward my truck, my mind racing. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be something James hadn't considered, some advantage we had that he didn't know about. But as I drove toward Piedmont Park, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was driving my daughter to her execution. And the worst part was, she was going to walk into it thinking she was finally getting answers about her family. Instead, she was about to become the latest victim of a war that started before she was born. I sat in my truck in the Piedmont Park parking lot, trying to figure out how to save my daughter's life. Every option I could think of seemed to lead to the same result. Keisha dead, me dead, and the Sterling family getting away with murder once again. I could call the police, but what would I tell them? That a wealthy businessman had threatened to kill us based on a century-old inheritance dispute? They'd think I was delusional, especially if James had already laid the groundwork by describing me as a homeless man trying to scam his girlfriend. I could try to convince Keisha not to come, but she was already on her way. And even if I could talk her out of the meeting, James had made it clear that they weren't going to let her live much longer anyway. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "Robert, where are you? I'm already at the Rose Garden, and I can see at least 3 men in suits who definitely aren't here to smell the flowers." "They know," I said. "James Sterling saw your text. They're planning to kill all of us today." There was a long pause. "Then we don't have much time. Where's Keisha?" "On her way." "Marcus, she doesn't know about the danger. She thinks this is just a conversation about her inheritance." "It is about her inheritance, but it's also about survival." His voice was grim. "Robert, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I've been preparing for this day for 60 years. I'm not going to let the Sterling family win again." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I didn't spend the last 6 decades just hiding and waiting. I've been gathering evidence, building a case, and preparing for war. The question is, are you ready to fight for your daughter?" I looked toward the Rose Garden, where I could see several men in dark suits trying to look casual as they positioned themselves around the area. "What do you need me to do?" "First, call Keisha. Tell her to park on the north side of the park, near the playground. There's a service road that leads out the back. If things go bad, that's her escape route." I dialed Keisha's number, praying she would answer. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "I'm 5 minutes away," she said without preamble. "I read Mother's letter, all of it. Keisha, listen to me carefully. You're walking into a trap. James Sterling and his people are planning to kill us today." "I know." Her response caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean you know?" "I mean I know about the trap. I've known about a lot of things for longer than you think." Her voice was different, harder, more focused. "Park on the north side, near the playground. I'll meet you there in 3 minutes." She hung up before I could ask what she meant. I stared at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. How could she have known about the trap? How long had she known about any of this? I drove to the north parking area and found Keisha waiting beside a black SUV I didn't recognize. She'd changed out of her business suit and was now wearing jeans, boots, and a leather jacket. She looked more like the daughter I remembered and less like the corporate executive who'd been pretending not to know me. "We need to talk before we meet Marcus," she said as I got out of my truck. "Keisha, what's going on? How did you know about the trap?" "Because I've been investigating the Sterling family for 2 years, Dad. Ever since I figured out that my entire life had been manipulated." Dad. She'd called me Dad. It was the first time she'd acknowledged our relationship in over 2 years. "I don't understand," I said. Keisha pulled out her phone and showed me a series of photographs. They were surveillance photos of James Sterling meeting with various people, transferring envelopes, making phone calls. "James Sterling isn't just my boyfriend," she said. "He's my assignment. I've been working undercover for the FBI for the past 18 months, investigating the Sterling family for tax evasion, money laundering, and suspected murder." My legs almost gave out. "You're FBI?" "Not exactly. I'm a consultant. I have a degree in forensic accounting from Harvard, remember? 6 months after I started working at Sterling and Associates, I noticed some irregularities in their financial records. When I started digging deeper, I discovered a pattern of suspicious deaths among people who had made claims against Sterling properties. She showed me another photo, this one of a document with the Sterling letterhead. This is a memo from 1987 discussing the elimination of a potential claimant to the Blackwood estate. When I found this, I contacted the FBI. "But why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep pretending?" "Because I was protecting you." Her voice cracked slightly. "I knew that if the Sterling family suspected you knew anything about the inheritance, they'd kill you. So I had to make them believe that I was completely estranged from you, that I was ashamed of my background and would never investigate my own family history." I stared at my daughter, really seeing her for the first time in years. "The way you treated me, the things you said, hurt me more than you'll ever know. But it was the only way to keep you safe while I gathered enough evidence to take them down." Tears were starting to form in her eyes. "I've been living a lie for 2 years, pretending to be in love with the descendant of the people who murdered our family, pretending to be ashamed of the father who sacrificed everything for me." "The engagement," I said, remembering James's threat. "He said there's going to be an engagement party tomorrow night." "There is. And I'm going to say yes when he proposes. And then I'm going to watch him get arrested at his own engagement party." She smiled, but it was a cold, dangerous expression. "The FBI has been building a RICO case against the Sterling family for months. Tax evasion, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. Tomorrow night, when all the major players are in one room celebrating their victory, we're going to bring down their entire organization." "But James said they were going to kill you after the engagement." "They're going to try, but they don't know that I've been wearing a wire for 6 months, recording every conversation, documenting every threat." She pulled a small device from her jacket pocket. "Including the conversation you had with James an hour ago." I felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. My daughter had been fighting a war I didn't even know was happening, putting her life at risk to get justice for our family. "But what about today? What about Marcus and the men with guns?" Keisha checked her watch. "Marcus Blackwood is FBI too. Has been for 20 years. He's been our inside man, pretending to be a revenge-seeking relative while actually gathering evidence against the Sterling family. So this whole thing, this meeting, is a setup, but not for us." She pointed toward the rose garden, where I could see the men in suits still positioning themselves. "Those aren't Sterling security. They're FBI agents waiting for James and his people to make their move. When they try to kill us, they'll be caught in the act, with multiple federal agents as witnesses." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your daughter is more clever than you know. Time to end this charade. Coming for you both now. JS." Keisha saw the message and smiled grimly. "Right on schedule." "Now, Keisha, what if something goes wrong? What if... Then at least I'll die knowing who I really am and knowing that my father loved me enough to risk everything to tell me the truth." She hugged me, the first real hug we'd shared in over 2 years. "I'm sorry for the things I said, Dad. I'm sorry for making you think I was ashamed of you. You were protecting me. I was protecting us both, but I hated every minute of it. Through the trees, I could see movement near the rose garden. Several black cars had pulled up, and men in expensive suits were getting out. "That's our cue," Keisha said. "Ready to meet your granddaughter's great-great-grandfather's killer." I looked at my daughter. Strong, brave, brilliant, and absolutely nothing like the shallow, materialistic woman she'd been pretending to be for 2 years. "Let's go get justice for our family," I said. As we walked toward the rose garden, I realized that the scared little girl who used to have nightmares had grown up to become the woman who hunted monsters. And today, the monsters were finally going to pay for what they'd done to the Blackwood family. Walking toward the rose garden with Keisha felt like walking toward destiny. But as we got closer, I started to notice things that didn't match what she'd told me about FBI surveillance and protection. The men positioned around the garden weren't trying to blend in anymore. They were openly displaying weapons, talking into earpieces, and moving with military precision. These weren't undercover agents. These were hired killers, preparing for an execution. "Keisha," I said, grabbing her arm, "something's wrong. Those men—" "I know, Dad. I see them too." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Change of plans. James must have figured out that we know about the trap." Before I could ask what she meant, Marcus Blackwood emerged from behind a large oak tree, but he wasn't alone. James Sterling III was right beside him, and James was holding a gun to Marcus's back. "Well, well," James called out as he spotted us. "The touching family reunion I've been hearing so much about. Please don't stop on our account. Come closer." We had no choice but to walk toward them. As we got closer, I could see that Marcus's face was bruised, and there was blood on his shirt. "I'm sorry, Robert," Marcus said, his voice thick with pain. "They were waiting for me when I got here. They knew about everything, the FBI investigation, Keisha's undercover work, all of it." My heart sank. "How?" James smiled triumphantly. "Because there never was an FBI investigation. Because Marcus Blackwood isn't an FBI agent. Because your daughter has been playing a very dangerous game, and she's not nearly as smart as she thinks she is." Keisha stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "You're lying." "Am I? Tell me, sweetheart. When you contacted the FBI about those financial irregularities you discovered, did you ever actually meet with real agents? Or did you meet with very convincing actors in a fake FBI office that we set up specifically for you?" The color drained from Keisha's face. "That's impossible, is it? You discovered exactly what we wanted you to discover when we wanted you to discover it. You've been following a trail of breadcrumbs that we laid out for you, thinking you were conducting a brilliant investigation when you were actually just giving us information about what you knew and when you planned to act on it." I watched my daughter's confident facade crumble as the implications hit her. The wire recordings are being transmitted to a receiver in my car, not to FBI headquarters. We've been monitoring every conversation, every plan, every moment of your supposed undercover operation. James's smile was cruel. Did you really think a family that successfully covered up murders for a century would be taken down by a girl with a business degree and delusions of being a federal agent? Marcus struggled against his restraints. Keisha, the documents you found, the evidence you've been gathering, it's all real. The Sterling family really did murder our ancestors. They really have been eliminating Blackwood heirs for decades. Of course it's real, James said casually. We wanted her to know the truth. We wanted her to understand exactly what she was walking into. There's no satisfaction in killing someone who dies ignorant. Much better when they die, knowing they've been completely outsmarted. But why? Keisha asked, her voice breaking. Why go through this elaborate charade? Why not just kill us quietly, like you killed the others? Because you're the last ones, James explained. After today, there will be no more Blackwood heirs, no more potential claimants to our fortune. We wanted to savor this moment, to enjoy watching the final chapter of this century-long story come to an end. He gestured to his men who began closing in around us. "Besides, this way is much more fun. You get to die knowing that everything you believed, everything you worked for, was a lie. Your heroic undercover mission, fiction. Your brilliant plan to bring us down, fantasy. Your touching reconciliation with dear old Dad, just another manipulation in our grand design." "You're wrong about one thing," I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. "Oh? And what's that?" "You said Keisha isn't as smart as she thinks she is. But you're wrong. She's exactly as smart as she thinks she is." James frowned. "What are you talking about?" Keisha looked at me with confusion, then understanding slowly dawned in her eyes. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. "You said you've been monitoring all my communications," she said to James, "but you've only been monitoring the communications you knew about." She held up her phone, showing a recording app that was actively running. "I've been recording everything on a secondary device, uploading it directly to a cloud server that you don't have access to. Every threat you just made, every confession, every admission of murder, it's all being stored in a location your fake FBI office can't reach." James's confident expression faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Let me play back my favorite part." Keisha tapped her phone, and James's voice came through the speaker clearly. "Of course it's real. We wanted her to know the truth. There's no satisfaction in killing someone who dies ignorant. After today, there will be no more Blackwood heirs. You get to die knowing that everything you believed was a lie." "Delete that," James snarled, raising his gun. "Can't. It's already uploaded, and it's set to automatically send to 3 different news outlets if I don't check in every hour." Keisha's smile was triumphant. "You taught me to be paranoid, James. You taught me not to trust anyone completely, so I didn't, not even the people I thought were helping me." Marcus was staring at Keisha with something approaching awe. "You played them the same way they played you." "I learned from the best," she said, glancing at James. 2 years of watching you manipulate people, lie to them, pretend to care about them while planning their destruction. It was quite an education." James's face was red with rage. "It doesn't matter. You're still going to die here today, all of you, and when they find your bodies, the recording will be dismissed as a desperate hoax from a delusional family with a century-old grudge." "Maybe," Keisha said, "but the recording isn't the only insurance policy I have." She pulled out a second phone, one I'd never seen before. "This one has been live streaming our entire conversation to social media. Thousands of people have been watching in real time as you confess to multiple murders." I looked around and noticed something I hadn't seen before. Small cameras mounted in the trees around the rose garden, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. "You see, James, while you were setting up your elaborate fake FBI operation, I was setting up my own surveillance network. Every threat you've made, every confession you've given, every detail about your family's crimes, it's all been broadcast live to the internet." James spun around, finally noticing the cameras. His men were looking nervous now, realizing that their faces were being recorded and transmitted to thousands of viewers. "The beautiful thing about live streaming," Keisha continued, "is that even if you kill me right now, even if you destroy every piece of evidence, the damage is already done. The whole world knows what the Sterling family is. The whole world knows what you've done." James's hand was shaking as he pointed the gun at her. "You think you're so clever, but you've just guaranteed that your death will be slow and painful instead of quick and merciful." "Actually," said a new voice from behind us, "she's guaranteed that you're all under arrest." We turned to see a dozen real FBI agents emerging from concealment positions around the garden, weapons drawn, bulletproof vests clearly marked with federal insignia. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with graying hair, stepped forward. "James Sterling III, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, multiple counts of homicide, fraud, tax evasion, and about 15 other federal crimes. You have the right to remain silent." As the agents moved in to arrest James and his men, I realized that my daughter had played a game within a game within a game. She'd let the Sterling family think they were manipulating her while she gathered real evidence and contacted real federal agents. How? I asked her as we watched James being led away in handcuffs. The fake FBI investigation was real from my perspective because I never contacted the fake FBI, she explained. I contacted the real FBI 6 months ago, told them about the fake investigation that was being run on me, and we decided to let it continue while I gathered evidence for a real case. So when you said you'd been undercover for 2 years, I was undercover from everyone, including you, including Marcus, including the real FBI until 6 months ago. The only way to stay safe was to make sure nobody, not even the people trying to help me, knew what I was really doing. I looked at my daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. You're exactly like your mother, too smart for your own good, and braver than anyone has a right to be. Keisha hugged me tightly. I learned from the best father a girl could ask for. Even when I was pretending to be ashamed of you, I was actually trying to live up to the example you set. As we walked away from the Rose Garden, with James Sterling and his conspirators in federal custody, I realized that the war between the Blackwoods and the Sterlings was finally over, and this time, the good guys had won. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta, watching my daughter testify against James Sterling III and the entire Sterling crime family. She'd been on the witness stand for 2 days, methodically laying out evidence that spanned nearly a century of murder, fraud, and theft. The media had dubbed it the trial of the century, and reporters from around the world were packed into the courtroom. The live stream from that day in the Rose Garden had gone viral, with over 50 million views in the first week. The Sterling family's century-old secrets were now front-page news across the globe. But what struck me most wasn't the media circus or the legal proceedings. It was watching Keisha transform back into the daughter I remembered. The cold corporate mask was completely gone, replaced by the passionate, determined young woman who'd always fought for what was right. The defendant approached me in March of 2022, she was saying from the witness stand, claiming to be attracted to my intelligence and ambition. What I later learned was that he had been assigned to monitor me after Sterling family surveillance detected that I was asking questions about historical property transfers. James Sterling's defense attorney, an expensive suit named Richardson, stood up. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating about my client's motivations. Overruled, Judge Martinez replied. The witness may continue. Keisha looked directly at James, who was sitting at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. He told me he loved me. He proposed marriage. He talked about our future together, all while planning to murder me the day after our wedding. The prosecution attorney, a fierce woman named Sarah Chen, approached the witness stand. Ms. Hayes, can you tell the court about the conversation you recorded on May 15th of this year? The defendant told me that wealthy wives sometimes have tragic accidents. He said it would happen after I signed documents transferring any claims to the Blackwood estate to the Sterling family. Keisha's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. He said he wanted me to know that the man I trusted completely had betrayed me before I died. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. And how did this make you feel? Attorney Chen asked. It made me realize that everything my father had tried to protect me from was real. That the people who murdered my great-great-grandfather were still out there, still killing, still stealing from families like ours. Keisha looked over at me in the gallery. It made me understand that my father had sacrificed everything, including our relationship, to keep me safe from monsters I didn't even know existed. After Keisha's testimony was finished, Marcus Blackwood took the stand. It turned out he really was Sarah's cousin, and he really had been gathering evidence against the Sterling family for decades. But unlike Keisha's fictional FBI handlers, Marcus had been working alone, driven by a need for justice that had consumed 60 years of his life. I watched my uncle Ezekiel build something beautiful, Marcus testified. He wasn't just wealthy, he was generous. He funded schools, hospitals, churches. He employed hundreds of people and treated them fairly regardless of their race. When the Sterling family murdered him and stole his fortune, they didn't just destroy one man, they destroyed a legacy that could have uplifted entire communities for generations. The defense tried to argue that the original events from 1922 were too old to be relevant, but the prosecution had done their homework. They presented evidence of Sterling family crimes spanning 9 decades, suspicious deaths, forged documents, bribery, intimidation and tax fraud on a massive scale. The most damning evidence came from the Sterling family's own records. Amanda Sterling, James's cousin and Keisha's former best friend, had kept meticulous files documenting their surveillance of potential Blackwood heirs. The files included photographs, financial records, and detailed plans for elimination of threats to their stolen fortune. On the 3rd day of testimony, Amanda Sterling herself took the stand as a prosecution witness. She'd agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. "James told me to get close to Keisha Hayes when she started working at our company," Amanda testified. "He said we needed to monitor her, find out what she knew about her family history." "And did you develop a genuine friendship with the defendant?" Attorney Chen asked. Amanda's voice was barely audible. "No, everything was calculated. The girls' trips, the late-night conversations, the career advice. It was all designed to keep her close and gather intelligence." "Did you know that your family had murdered her ancestor?" "I've known since I was 12 years old. My grandfather told me it was something to be proud of, that our family had protected the natural order of society by preventing a black man from becoming too powerful." The admission sent a ripple of shock through the courtroom. Even the judge looked disturbed by the casual way Amanda described her family's racist motivations. "And what was the plan for Ms. Hayes?" "After the engagement, James was supposed to get her to sign documents renouncing any claims to Blackwood properties. Then there would be an accident, probably a car crash or house fire, something that would look natural but ensure she could never threaten our family's control of the stolen assets." I watched Keisha's face as her former best friend described the plan to murder her. She showed no emotion, but I knew my daughter well enough to see the pain behind her composed exterior. The trial lasted 3 weeks. When it was over, James Sterling III was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Amanda Sterling got 25 years. 17 other Sterling family members and associates received sentences ranging from 5 to 40 years. But the most significant outcome wasn't the prison sentences, it was the civil judgment. The court ordered the Sterling family to return all assets that could be traced to Ezekiel Blackwood's original fortune, plus a century of compound interest and punitive damages. The total amount was staggering, $1.2 billion. Standing on the courthouse steps after the final judgment, with reporters shouting questions and cameras flashing, Keisha turned to me and Marcus. "So, what do we do now?" she asked. "We have more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes, and justice for our family. What comes next?" Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since we met. "We do what Ezekiel would have wanted us to do. We use this fortune to build something beautiful. Schools," Keisha said immediately, "hospitals, community centers. Everything they stole from us for a century, we give back to the communities they've been exploiting." I looked at my daughter and my wife's cousin, 2 generations of Blackwoods who had refused to let injustice stand. "Your mother would be so proud," I said. "She'd be proud of all of us," Keisha replied. "We kept her family's story alive. We made sure the truth finally came out." As we walked away from the courthouse, I realized that this wasn't really an ending. It was a beginning. The Blackwood name would no longer be associated with tragedy and loss. Instead, it would represent justice, perseverance, and the power of family to overcome even the darkest secrets. But there was still one more surprise waiting for us. One more revelation that would change everything we thought we knew about our story. and I wouldn't discover it until we returned to clean out Sarah's old belongings and prepare to honor her memory with the fortune she'd never known her daughter would reclaim. 6 months after the trial ended, Keisha and I drove back to Millbrook to clean out the storage unit where I'd kept Sarah's belongings for over 20 years. We'd been so focused on the legal battles and establishing the Blackwood Foundation that we hadn't had time to go through her personal effects. The foundation was already making a difference. We'd opened 3 community schools, funded a free medical clinic, and were breaking ground on a community center that would bear Ezekiel Blackwood's name. But despite all our success, I could tell that Keisha was struggling with something she wasn't ready to talk about. "You've been quiet lately," I said, as we pulled up to Miller's storage facility. "Everything okay?" She stared at the rows of identical storage units, her expression troubled. "I keep thinking about what James said in the Rose Garden, about how there would be no more Blackwood heirs after us. He was wrong. We survived. We won. But what if he wasn't entirely wrong?" She turned to look at me. "Dad, what if there are other family members out there, people who don't know their real history, people who might be in danger?" It was a question that had been nagging at me too. Marcus had been helping us research the family tree, but records from the early 1900s were incomplete, especially for black families who had often been excluded from official documentation. We opened storage unit 47B, and I was hit with a wave of memories. Boxes of Sarah's clothes, her books, photo albums from our brief but happy marriage, everything I'd been too heartbroken to look through when she died. "I haven't been in here since I packed this stuff up," I admitted. "I kept meaning to go through it, but it hurt too much," Keisha finished. She squeezed my hand. "We can do this together." We spent the first hour going through photo albums, and I watched Keisha discover pieces of her mother she'd never known. Sarah as a young woman laughing with friends. Sarah on our wedding day, radiant in a simple white dress. Sarah holding newborn Keisha, her face glowing with love and exhaustion. "She was beautiful," Keisha said softly, staring at a picture of Sarah in her early 20s, "inside and out. She would have been so proud of what you accomplished, of the woman you became." Keisha wiped away a tear and picked up another box. "What's this one?" The box was labeled Family Papers in Sarah's careful handwriting. Inside were birth certificates, marriage licenses, and other documents, but also things I'd never seen before. Letters in envelopes I didn't recognize. A small leather journal with a lock that had been broken long ago. "I never saw Mom's journal," Keisha said, opening it carefully. "Did you know she kept one?" "No, she was very private about some things." Keisha began reading, and I watched her expression change from curiosity to confusion to shock. "Dad, you need to read this. Entry from March 15th, 1999. She handed me the journal, and I read Sarah's familiar handwriting. "Robert doesn't know about Rebecca. How can I tell him that when I ran from my family, I left behind a sister? Rebecca was only 14 when I disappeared. She must be 31 now. Does she know what happened to our parents? Does she know about the Sterling family? Is she safe? I've hired a private investigator to find her, but I'm terrified of what I might discover. What if she's dead? What if contacting her puts her in danger? What if she hates me for abandoning her?" My hands were shaking as I read. Sarah had a sister, Rebecca Blackwood, Keisha said, flipping through more pages. "Mom wrote about her constantly. Look at this entry from 6 months later. Found her. Rebecca is alive, married, living in Seattle under the name Rebecca Morris. She has 3 children, twin boys named David and Daniel, age 8, and a daughter named Maya, age 6. She's a nurse at Seattle General Hospital. She looks happy in the photos the investigator sent, but I can't contact her. The investigator says the Sterling family has been monitoring her too, waiting to see if she'll ever use the Blackwood name or make inquiries about the family fortune. If I reach out to her, I'll be signing her death warrant and the death warrants of her children." "Cousins," Keisha whispered. "I have cousins I've never met." I kept reading, my heart breaking with every entry. Sarah had watched her sister from afar for years, celebrating Rebecca's milestones through private investigator reports and stolen photographs. She'd wanted desperately to be part of Rebecca's life, to know her grandchildren, but she'd stayed away to protect them. The final entry about Rebecca was dated just 1 month before Sarah's death. The cancer is spreading faster than the doctors expected. I may not have much time left. I want to write to Rebecca, to warn her about the dangers our family faces, but I'm too weak to risk putting her children in harm's way. If something happens to me, I pray that Robert will never need to involve Rebecca in this nightmare. But if he does, if the Sterling family ever threatens Keisha, maybe Rebecca can help. Maybe together, my daughter and my sister's children can finish what our great-grandfather started. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, was a sealed envelope addressed to Rebecca Morris, née Blackwood, Seattle, Washington. Mom wrote her a letter, Keisha said, staring at the envelope. She wrote it but never sent it. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and read Sarah's final message to the sister she'd lost. My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, it means something terrible has happened to me, and my husband Robert has had to seek you out. I'm sorry for leaving you when you were so young. I'm sorry for never contacting you, for missing your wedding, for never meeting your children. I was trying to protect you from the curse that has followed our family for generations. But now you need to know the truth. You need to know about Ezekiel Blackwood, about what the Sterling family stole from us, and about the danger that threatens anyone who carries our blood. More importantly, you need to know about my daughter Keisha. She is brave and brilliant and stubborn, just like you were as a child. If she has found you, it means she needs her family. Don't let her face this fight alone. All my love, your sister Sarah. I looked at Keisha, who was crying freely now. We have to find her. Dad, that letter is from 2001. Rebecca's children would be adults now. They might have children of their own. Then we need to warn them. If the Sterling family knew about Rebecca 23 years ago, they probably still know about her now. Keisha pulled out her phone. Rebecca Morris, Seattle. She'd be 54 now if she's still alive. It took less than 5 minutes to find her. Rebecca Morris, RN, still working at Seattle General Hospital, still married to the same man, Thomas Morris. According to social media, the twins David and Daniel were now 31-year-old doctors, and Maya was a 29-year-old teacher with 2 young children of her own. She's alive, Keisha said, staring at a Facebook photo of Rebecca surrounded by her family. Look at her, Dad. She looks exactly like Mom did at that age. I studied the photo. Rebecca had Sarah's eyes, Sarah's smile, Sarah's gentle expression. But more than that, her daughter Maya looked remarkably like Keisha. The resemblance is uncanny, I agreed. But Keisha, if we contact her, if we bring her into this, she's already in this, Keisha said firmly. The Sterling family knows she exists. They've probably been watching her for decades, just waiting for her to make a move. At least if we warn her, she'll have a chance to protect herself and her family. I thought about Sarah's words. Don't let her face this fight alone. What if Rebecca doesn't want to know? What if she's built a good life and doesn't want it destroyed by our family's history? Keisha looked at the photo again, studying the faces of the aunt and cousins she'd never met. Then we'll respect her choice. But we have to give her the option to know the truth. That evening, we sat in my apartment drafting a letter to Rebecca Morris. How do you tell someone that their sister spent 23 years protecting them from murderers? How do you explain that they're entitled to a fortune, but claiming it might cost them their lives? In the end, we kept it simple. Dear Rebecca, my name is Keisha Hayes, and I believe you are my aunt. My mother was Sarah Blackwood Hayes, who died in 2001. I've recently learned that you exist, and I think it's time our families met. There are things you need to know about our shared history, things that might affect the safety of your children and grandchildren. Please call me when you're ready to hear the truth about the Blackwood family. We included my phone number and mailed the letter the next morning. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6 a.m. The caller ID showed a Seattle area code. Is this Keisha Hayes? The voice was older, more mature, but unmistakably similar to Sarah's. "Yes, is this Rebecca? I've been waiting for this call for over 20 years, she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. Ever since my sister disappeared, I've been waiting for someone from her new life to find me. You knew she was alive? I hired investigators too. I knew she'd gotten married, had a daughter, settled in Georgia. I knew she died of cancer in 2001. But I never contacted her because I was afraid the same people who killed our parents would kill her too. I felt a chill run down my spine. You know about the Sterling family? I know everything, Rebecca said. And I know that you've just exposed them all and claimed our inheritance. I know because I've been watching the news coverage of the trial. I've been so proud of my niece for finishing what our great-grandfather started. Why didn't you contact us during the trial? Because you were handling it beautifully without me. But now that it's over, now that the Sterling family is in prison, maybe it's time for the Blackwood family to truly reunite. How soon can you get to Atlanta? Keisha asked, taking the phone from me. Rebecca laughed, the same musical laugh that Sarah used to have. I'm already here. I flew in yesterday. I've been staying at the Marriott downtown, trying to work up the courage to call you. Come over right now, Keisha said without hesitation. It's time you met your family. An hour later, there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, I saw Sarah standing in the hallway. Or at least, what Sarah would have looked like if she'd lived to be 54. Rebecca Morris looked exactly like her sister, just with silver threading through her hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Behind her stood 3 adults who could only be her children and 2 small children who were obviously Maya's kids. Hello, Robert, Rebecca said, and her voice was so much like Sarah's that I almost couldn't breathe. I'm sorry it took us so long to meet. Rebecca, I couldn't say anything else. I just stood there staring at the sister Sarah had never stopped loving, the family we'd never known we had. And you must be Keisha, Rebecca said, turning to my daughter. You look exactly like your mother did at your age. Keisha stepped forward and hugged her aunt, tentatively at first, then with growing emotion. I can't believe you're real. I can't believe we found you. Actually, said one of Rebecca's sons, David or Daniel, I couldn't tell which. We've been keeping track of you for years. We knew eventually the truth would come out. Maya stepped forward with her 2 young children. These are my kids, Sarah, age 7, and Ezekiel, age 5. I named them after their great-great-great-grandmother and great-great-great-great-grandfather. I stared at the little boy named after our ancestor. He had the same dark eyes, the same determined expression that I'd seen in that century-old photograph. There's something else you need to know, Rebecca said, as we all settled into my small living room. Something I discovered when I started researching our family history 20 years ago. What? Ezekiel Blackwood wasn't the only successful black businessman the Sterling family targeted. Over the past century, they've systematically destroyed dozens of black-owned businesses, always using the same methods: forge documents, create legal challenges, and eliminate anyone who fights back. I mean the Blackwood case was just the beginning. There are other families out there, other descendants of people the Sterling family robbed and murdered. And now that we've proven it can be done, now that we've shown these crimes can be exposed and prosecuted, we can help them get justice too, Keisha finished. Rebecca smiled, Sarah's smile on an older, wiser face. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. As I sat there surrounded by family I'd never known existed, watching my daughter meet cousins she'd never dreamed of having, I realized that our story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The Blackwood family had been scattered and broken for a century, but now we were whole again, and together we were going to make sure that what happened to us never happened to another family again. Sarah's final wish had come true. Keisha wasn't facing this fight alone anymore. She had her family back,